Okay, the hour of 6:30 having arrived, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Columbus Plan Commission for Thursday, May 12th, 2022. Kyle, will you call the roll?
Motive?
Aye.
Albright?
Here. Present.
Thielen is excused. Baston is excused. Traxler?
He's muted.
I see him. I know he's here. Monday?
Present.
Myers?
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. All right, item 3 on the agenda, notice of open meeting. This meeting has been properly noticed in accordance with state law. Number 4, the agenda as printed. So before I entertain a motion to approve the agenda, we've been notified that item 8A has been requested by the applicant to be pulled. So given that, I will entertain a motion to approve an amended agenda.
Hold or table?
Tabled, right? Alder Albright will make a motion to approve the agenda, tabling number 8.
Motive will second.
I have a motion and a second. I almost said a motive and a second. A motion and a second. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Opposed? All right, we will work with this agenda as amended. Item 5, approve the minutes from the April 14th Plan Commission meeting. A copy of those minutes are in your packets. Take a moment. I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the April 14th Plan Commission meeting.
Alder Albright can second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? All right, the minutes from last meeting are approved. Moving on to item 6, citizen comments. There are no citizens in the room. We do have somebody on Zoom, but that's the applicant for item 7A.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay. Did you receive any by email or
No, I did
phone to
not.
add into the record? Great. All right. So nothing for 6. Moving on to item 7A, unfinished business, review and make recommendation regarding the request of Hannah Thomas for a conditional use permit to allow a bed and breakfast for parcel number 11211-267 located at 428 South Birdsey. So Kyle, you want to introduce this, please?
Yes, this item was discussed fairly extensively at the last Plan Commission meeting, and there was some request for follow-up regarding some fire inspections and building inspections. And so we did have discussions with the fire chief and the building inspector. Ultimately, what it comes down to is we don't have any authority in our ordinance to order those inspections. And so these basically ends up being just a normal house, according to the fire department and the building inspector. We would have to change our ordinance to allow us that authority to, have people enter their home and do an inspection, not to mention establish some inspection criteria that they would be looking for. I did check with the city attorney, and he concurs that there doesn't appear to be authority for the Plan Commission to order these inspections as part of this process. I also have in front of you just an excerpt from the code talking about the conditional use permit process and the standards about what the Plan Commission would need to find for the approval of the conditional use permit. That's 11429. And then on the second page, there's the conditions of issuance and talks about what conditions you could put on an approval, remembering that they should be, fairly specific and measurable if possible. And that's all I wanted to kind of wrap this up with, but there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting, and so I don't know if those that weren't here would benefit from more discussion on that or not.
I mean, I don't personally have any questions.
I do. As far as the general standards, number 2, the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property. When I reviewed this property, it appears that the driveway is very, very narrow, and so I'm wondering if there's going to be a parking issue?
I think that, I think that was one of the concerns that was brought up, and, I think there was some discussion of how it might be accommodated, but I also think that the conditions that you may want to consider, if this is approved, would talk about the number of guests allowed, because if she is traveling, she does talk about renting out the entire home on those dates, and those people might not move their car further away, and they might, crowd up that neighborhood and make parking difficult. But that was one of the probably major objections that some of the neighbors had, and that would be the most visible and kind of daily intrusion that I would anticipate.
So I actually do have something to say. So we determined that the garage is a 2-car garage. So when we discussed it, it was 2 people max. We didn't discuss her having a third and potential for a third car if she's gone. So I guess, could we get some more information on that then?
Yeah, I'd love to share. So I have a 2-car garage, and then there's also space in front of the garage to have a third vehicle. I don't anticipate traveling a lot. That was more put in there just in case there was a trip that I was taking. But there would be space for 3 cars, and then also within the Airbnb description, I can tell the guests that they are only allowed to have 1 vehicle. So then that would eliminate the issue of people parking in front of my neighbors' homes.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to add for the discussion, the garage is I think it's a tandem is what it's called, but it's basically double stacked. So you can fit 2 cars end to end. And so if you had 3 cars with the parking spot and then the 2 in the garage nose to tail, it may be difficult and people may not want to do that. But I also want to acknowledge that she's really looking, hopefully, I think at, more longer term, like medical professionals, nurses that are traveling. And in that kind of setup, if they're there for weeks or a month or something like that, they may be able to coordinate schedules so you're not having to wake 2 people up to move the car that's furthest in the garage. So it could be accommodated, likely, I'm thinking.
Can I mention one more thing? So I mainly have the goal of hosting travel nurses, and last time we spoke, I shared that there's a Furnished Findings website that kind of shows the need in the area. And so I looked within a 20-mile radius, and even just this week, there was 1,200 searches to look for housing for travel nurses. And so that's my main focus, to kind of fill that need. And so I would be looking for people that are staying for multiple months. And in that situation, then I think we also discussed I could park my car on the street, and then that alleviates some of the issues with parking too. As part of the code, they said that I have 1 spot allotted in front of my house as well. And so that's kind of how we discussed last time.
Yeah, I was going to ask about street parking. You just mentioned that's part of the code, that there's a spot allotted in front of the house. Can you explain that a little more, Kyle? I mean, I can imagine that there's typically a space in front of each house for a car, but
Yeah,
as far as I know, there's no code ordinances for,
The ordinance says anybody can park on the street anywhere they want. That's a parking zone for
Yeah.
72 hours without moving their car.
right,
I mean,
okay,
honestly, she can park her car wherever she wants.
right. Right. Okay.
She can park it in the public lot if she wants to make her, people park in one of the city public lots because there's gonna be a lot of in and out, a couple blocks away. It's a small town.
Right. Not having been here for the public hearing, I'm willing to hear from anybody kind of what the neighbors' concerns seem to be. Did they seem to be, and I hate to do this because it's like asking somebody else's opinion, but.
Yep, Andy will, and I have some things to say too.
What I remember was there was, a few people that were concerned about how big the backyard was. One gentleman was concerned that the house didn't have air conditioning, which is irrelevant among the parking. Those are the three things that stuck out to me.
Right, and then the one gentleman that spoke that said that the place wasn't up to code, which is how we ended up going into that range. Well, maybe we need to have somebody look at this. So that was the other.
And that was to me irrelevant as well, because how does he know someone else's house is up to code?
And can I mention something else?
Absolutely.
Yeah, please go ahead.
One of their concerns was that there would be like parties and it would just be kind of a wild place within a quiet neighborhood. And I just wanted to reiterate that I work from home, so I'm around a lot. I'm also a single lady, and so I'm not going to be letting sketchy people in my home. Like, safety is a huge priority for me. It's really meant for a quiet and safe place for people to rest and have a place to stay if they are traveling for work and things like that. And so if it were to become an issue where we did get people in that were, partying or using it for the wrong reasons for any purpose, then I would happily also just close it down, because that's not the purpose of why I'm hosting people.
Plus the Airbnb terms and conditions are in your favor to protect you and your property from these type of scenarios. Like, you'll have an out immediately. If someone breaks the rules, you can evict them essentially without issue. Not like a roommate where you have to wait, get an eviction notice and maybe get them evicted. This is a business.
Right, and I can only imagine that people coming to the hearing, right, if you see Airbnb, that can mean a whole spectrum of things. And so hearing sort of the discussion that you have, Ms. Thomas, about what your intent is, I think allows us to set some parameters that still fit with what your outlook for this is. So sounded like there was discussion about limitation on number of guests, limitation on number of vehicles.
Yep.
I mean, we still have a noise ordinance that applies to anybody and everybody that's going to be there. If you got a loud grandma, it's going to apply, right?
Right. I think there was a lot of concern because we didn't, the picture that we saw, it didn't really scream two-car garage, because it was just a single car door and our garage door. And then when it came out that it was actually a tandem garage, I think people kind of relaxed about it, I guess. I think the parking might have been the biggest issue is what I remember.
Yeah, I agree, Shelley. That's what I remember.
Some of the conditions that the commission could consider could be if there's, say, 2 noise citations in a 12-month period, that could be a condition where it would be suspended, or if there's validated complaints where the police department finds people staying at her house as paying guests parked on the street or something like that, so that if we could actually prove there was a problem, then maybe there would be something you would do instead of kind of speculation about, well, what if? We could just put in the conditions and let the performance kind of dictate how the conditional use goes.
I like that.
I have a question. Our conditional use, can we put a expiration date on a conditional use permit? I thought we discussed this at one point in time with another proposal, and I don't remember what the answer to that was.
I believe there are limits that you can put on there regarding the timing and whether or not it's transferable. You could put a mandatory review period on this, I believe, as well, just to make sure that it would come back up for an actual discussion about how it's been going.
I would like to make a recommendation that we make a condition that it's not transferable, for sure.
Not transferable.
So if the house is sold, the conditional use permit does not go with the sale.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
They would just have to reapply,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
What's the likelihood that somebody is gonna buy it and wanna do an Airbnb?
Airbnb
Yeah.
would be with her name and
Right.
the homes.
Mm-hmm.
That
Terminates as soon as she no longer has the house or she gets out of the Airbnb.
Yep, that would need to be one of the conditions put in there, but I think it's a wise one because we're kind of vesting trust in Hannah. And who knows who the next homeowner might be. They might not have as good of intentions as Hannah does.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I like the idea of you know, bringing this back in a year for a review. I like the, you know, the condition where, you know, if you sell the house, it doesn't transfer. I mean, we have options to protect, you know, the city, and we have, you know, and, you know, a lot of these options are really of no, you know, there's really nothing that's gonna affect, the Airbnb and your business to host those traveling nurses and such, so. I don't know, I like those ideas.
I agree with that, and I also think if she does come back in a year and it turns out to be incredibly, that it works, you know, it's productive, that maybe that's something that, you know, more people will be more likely to maybe get involved in, if there's a history of it being successful.
What about the idea of needing to provide the city with a copy of, I don't mean I wouldn't intend every guest to have to provide a city a copy, but do you have, I guess I don't know how Airbnb works, Hannah, do you have an agreement with Airbnb that runs for a certain period of time, or?
I have not moved forward with the process to be able to officially be on Airbnb. I've discussed it with them, but I was kind of waiting on approval from you guys before I do that. But I do know like they screen anyone that's on Airbnb. That you can like join Airbnb and you can take your house off of there very easily. And so I know the process is pretty simple. I don't know if that really answers your question.
It kind of does, yeah.
But, you're right, my comment to that would be, we don't require a copy of contracts for other businesses that are trying to do business with people in Columbus, so I think that would be out of the ordinary to ask the Airbnb host to do that.
I agree on that matter. I have used Airbnb previously. They do screen you pretty well. And in addition, the host has the ability to screen you even further. So if Hannah is using, you know, the program for the traveling nurses, I'm sure she'll be able to.
And they also have the ability to evict you.
They also have reviews, and so I can look and see, you know, how do people rate them from their past experience. So if people have really low reviews and bad comments, then I can just choose not to host them. There's a lot of control for the host on who comes in, and so they all have to be approved by me before they're welcome to stay.
Okay, thanks, everybody. That answers my question. Any other discussion? If we don't have any, I'll entertain a motion.
Alder Albright will make a motion to approve the request by Hannah Thomas for conditional use permit to allow a bed and breakfast for parcel number 11211-267 located at 428 South Birdsey Street.
We need to amend that
Yeah.
motion, not amend it, I don't know if we're in the amend period, but if you want those conditions, this is where you have to put it.
Yep. Oh, the,
That is non-transferable.
oh, yeah, okay. With the amendment that is non-transferable,
And we will review.
and we'll review in a year.
Motif will second.
Discussion? Were we going to consider a condition on limit of number of guests and limit on number of cars?
Well, we definitely have to do that, right? I mean, because if it's the middle of winter, we can't park on the street. I mean, yes, they could go to a public, I mean, she realistically has 3 spaces in her, in
So-
her.
How many rooms are you renting again, potentially?
It's just 2 rooms,
2 rooms.
so, yeah,
So-
they can only have 1 car, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Right, and then,
She's already only renting 2 rooms, probably of the, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't think we would need that condition, but, I mean, if the commission's comfortable with that, I mean, you
Not
only have
to-
so much room in your house now anyway, so.
Not to exceed number, or?
Yeah, I don't anticipate both rooms being full at all times at the same time.
I
Okay.
think the only risk is when you rent the full house, right? Are you going to limit the amount of people that can rent the full house?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many beds. And so, I have a Ring doorbell as well, so I can see how many guests are coming in and out of the house.
How many guests are you
If
limiting it?
Sorry?
How many guests are you limiting it to when you rent the full house?
Full house it would be 8 people, but I would still list it as 3 cars would be limited.
Okay.
Uriah, you could maybe do a performance standard of no renters on the street. And then if we can document that they are parking on the street, and the police can do that, you know, by running their registration, then that's really what we're trying to avoid. So maybe it could be as simple as that.
I don't know that, I don't know that sort of trying to keep track of whether somebody's on the street or not is gonna work. I would say it's more of a total limitation on, or a limitation on the total number of cars, right? And so whether they are in the garage or on the street becomes a little bit immaterial. Like logic would say likely there are going to be 2 to 3 in the garage and driveway and maybe 0 to 1 on the street. I think people given their preference or given their option would prefer to park in the driveway or the garage anyway. So I don't know that, that's going to gain us anything.
Can I ask a newbie and possibly very dumb question? So if we put a limit on parking for her like that, what if she decides she is going to have a party to celebrate her mother's birthday? Are we limiting her as to what she can do personally as well?
This is a limitation on the business, and I would say that, no, that limitation would not apply.
So the challenge is going to be, it's like anything, trying to determine what's her own party and what's renters. And so limiting the number of cars on the lot is kind of deaf to, you know, why they're there. It's just kind of a, how many cars are on the lot. If you did go the way of, saying if the renters are parking on the street, you then have a violation, and we're not going to monitor it. It's going to be a complaint based when the neighbors start saying all the people staying in her house are parking out front, and then we're going to follow up on it. And so I don't know if one's easier than the other, but it would be very difficult just to go on raw number of cars, I think.
If I'm not hosting anyone and I have, you know, my parents come and stay with me or a friend come and stay, if it was just a normal home, I would be allowed to have my friends and family park on the street. And so that would be a concern, that if it's written in there, that my neighbors will call saying, you know, bothering you guys or the police or whoever, saying, these people are not supposed to be parking there when it's not breaking any of the rules. And so that's just a concern of mine if you were to put that in writing.
I would prefer that we say something like, if there's 2 or possibly even 3 valid complaints within the 1 year, that there would be a revocation.
We would need to define valid, because you're gonna have people calling, potentially you could have anybody calling just because they're in a mood.
Yeah, that's true.
I think limiting it to the 1 year will give us a good
Yeah.
window of time to just sort of take all that information
Right.
in, if and when it gets, gets reapplied for.
So are we at the point to move forward? I mean, we've had a motion and a second to approve it with just those 2.
I'm
So-
good moving forward as with what has been motioned.
I am too.
Me too.
I would prefer still to limit the number of guests and/or cars, and I would suggest this. If there is an active rental agreement, the premises as a whole, so this would include your car too, Hannah, I presume you have one, or anyway, the premises as a whole could not have more than 3 cars nor 8 people, right? So what that does is that allows you to rent out the whole house to up to 8 people when you are not there. That would even allow you to rent out the house to up to 7 people with you there, which sounds like it's not your preference, but that would still be, within the bounds. And wouldn't limit you on what you seem to want to do when you're there. Does that make sense? Andy, I saw you shaking your head.
No, I was just worried, you saying 3, but, we're also, she's allowed to park on the street.
Right.
So that's cool.
And that's
She's a resident, she's a taxpayer.
situation relative.
I can park on the street tonight.
That's why the part about having an active rental agreement is key, right? If you don't have an active rental agreement and you want to have your family and friends over and you don't have you're not renting to them, then that limitation doesn't apply.
But that goes back to when I said the word valid, as to what Shelley was saying. If the neighbors are just upset about it, they can call the police on a whim, and I don't want to waste their time on somebody's whim.
I agree with that. I get what you're going for here, and I don't mind the potential of putting a restriction on the people, but I would just be cautious, of limiting it to. You could say 3 on the property, 3 vehicles on the property, on the premise, but does that then would allow Hannah to park on the street, her mom to park on the street?
Right.
If it's not an active rental agreement, she could have 8 guests and her mom and dad come over.
Yeah, and that's it. My family itself, there's 8 of us, so when my whole family comes over, if that's in writing and then my neighbors call the police because there's more than 8 people there, it just seems like it's gonna get tricky.
Then,
My goal is not to overbook the house. I don't want, huge parties, large groups in the home.
I wouldn't think so.
And so that's not the goal. Most of these will be rented to one person at a
right,
time.
and my goal isn't to put some onerous restriction on here. My goal actually with that is to be able to demonstrate to any neighbors that might call to say, look, we've considered what your comments were, and we believe we've addressed your comments and still allowed the applicant to do what she wanted to do. So that's the intent.
Ryan, would you be open to, like what Kyle said, put that modification on there that says you can't have any active rentals park on the street?
Right, that makes sense.
I think that would achieve.
Because if you,
what I'm
at the
thinking
end
of
of the
here.
day, we only have parking restriction from November to April. And she could have 20 people over at her house and everybody can park in the neighborhood. And yeah, I think that makes sense. Active rentals can't park on the street, or I do know that she can't have any more than 3 cars because of the way the driveway was set up. There's no way,
Yeah.
parking on the grass would not be good.
So it's a problem that takes care of itself if we say the active rentals can't be on the street.
Yep.
And if anybody's parking in the tree border, that's a violation of a city ordinance already, so, I mean, all these things are covered in our code. I think.
I'm saying that guests can only park in my garage and my driveway, that's year round, not just the snow removal part. Correct?
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So do we need to make a new motion then?
Albright would need to amend the motion and Modas would need to amend the second.
Okay, so I'm amending that, okay, so it's non-transferable, it's a 12-month review, and no more than, we have a maximum of 8 renters? Or are we not doing that? Whole house?
You're making the motion, so you
I
can do
know,
what you like.
I want to make sure that it's right, so that's why I'm asking. So, all right, 8 renters, 3 cars in the, okay, all right. Alder Albright is going to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit to allow a bed and breakfast for parcel number 11211-267 located at 428 South Burgess Street with the exceptions. It's not transferable if she sells. We're going to have a 12-month review. We have a maximum of whole house rental would be 8, and then 3 rental cars or 3 rentals. I don't know how to say that properly. 3 rental cars?
Can I
Rent-
suggest 3 cars owned by renters?
3 cars owned by renters.
Yes. No, we shouldn't say yes, because renters.
Yes, yes.
Motive will second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion as amended and seconded signify by aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. That's recommendation to council. Thank you, everyone.
Good luck, Hannah.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on. Item 8A was tabled. Item 8B, review and make recommendation regarding the request of Chris Relke for a CSM to combine parcel 11211-1018 and 11211-1141.
All right, so the issue here is he owns 2 parcels contiguous to one another. And because he wants to build a shed on the second parcel that doesn't have a primary building, you can't have an accessory building without a primary. So he would like to do the CSM to erase the line and make this one lot. The issue is that they are currently zoned the same. So the house is R4, the more empty lot is rural development. We'll need to get those on the same zoning. So we have notified the surveyor and the property owner that that's an issue right now, and they're going to be contacting us to submit the required paperwork. The CSM looked good to me. The only thing missing was the required zoning information and change. And so the recommendation would be one of 2 things. To either table the CSM until they can get the rezoning considered, or to conditionally approve this contingent upon one of the parcels being rezoned so that they have consistent zoning. Could go either way.
I would be in favor of, tabling it for due diligence, just like we did this Airbnb.
Kyle, how long do you think it's going to take to get that done? Just one cycle?
I think just one cycle, because a lot of times the rezoning, one of the issues is the survey. They have that done, so they really just need the paperwork exercise of,
Right, okay.
asking.
All right, I would agree with that. I think that makes sense.
And in my sort of purview and experience, it wouldn't change their time frame. Like doing it either way would still put them at the same date for doing whatever construction they want to do, right? If we table this, they can bring their rezone, we can have the public hearing on the rezone, do the rezone, and then at the same meeting in a later agenda item, do the CSM.
Okay,
So,
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Change the timeline, right? Good point, Uriah.
All right, so I will entertain a motion of some kind.
Alder Motif will make a motion to table item 8B regarding the recommendation for the request from Chris Roque for a CSM until the property is rezoned.
Second.
Any discussion? I don't have an amendment to that, but can the record reflect that the map and the rezone could appear at the same meeting? Or at least inform the applicant of that? All right, any further discussion or commentary? Hearing none, all those in favor of tabling signify by aye.
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 Opposed? None. Item will be carried over.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Motion and second. All signify by aye.
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 Opposed? None. Meeting's adjourned.
No.
All right.